Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles in partnership with Filmmaker magazine. I'm delighted to be joined here with Renaldho with his movie The Fire Next Time, all the way from Los Angeles, USA to Luton, England. How cool is that? But for those that haven't seen his film, let's take a look at the clip. Renaldho, really awesome to have you here. And again, thanks so much for making your film and bringing it to New Filmmakers LA. It's been a pleasure. But for those that haven't seen it, tell us a brief synopsis of your film.
So The Fire Next Time is based on the 2011 London riots, and it shoots as rioting breaks out as this shadow closes in on the characters in the estates. And so the film looks at how structural violence and social power systems had an impact on the 2011 London riots.
Listen, being a British person myself and remembering that time really, really well, and being a bit younger as well, and kind of around the age group of people that were very, very sad and upset about how our country and society was going during that time. Where did the inspiration come for you in deciding to turn this very important subject into a film and into this wonderful style of animation that you've got as well?
So I'd always been really interested in the 2011 London riots, and in particular how the media and politicians had responded to the riots. There was like a widespread opinion that it was just a kind of practice of looting, basically, that people were going out and using it as an opportunity to kind of steal things and exploit the vulnerability of the state. And I think that while some of that might be true, it completely overlooks the energy that gets people to that gets like the city to the point where it's vulnerable in the first place. So there's always some issue that's happened first that's like an igniting issue that leads to protest or rioting, and then in those moments where the police and rioters are clashing, there's opportunities for people. But before that, there's a whole story that's unfolded, and there's a whole energy around some particular problem. And so it's important to look at why people mobilized. And so I thought that would be a good subject for like a short animation. But initially I was thinking that it should be like a documentary film, to be honest, but it kind of changed over the process.
I'm glad that you made it in a start an animation, because, and I'm so, I think that whole period was, and the reason why things were happening during that time in 2011 was, it felt like our country, our establishment was completely in denial of facing the truth and what people were going through, and how not everyone was living this glorified life and people were struggling. And, and I think there's so many elements in there that even still this day are misunderstood, and not, no one was kind of willing to really understand why was this happening and why it was going on. And I'm so glad that you articulated it in this way. Is this something you've been thinking of? Because obviously I can't believe it's 10 years ago. But was this something that has been sort of on your mind for quite a few years, and it sort of came to fruition now? Or do you still, part of you still feels a lot of this resonates with today as well, in not just the UK, but other countries too?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of premise of the film is that a lot of these social ills are cyclical, and that because we have these underlying problems like poverty or lack of opportunity and stuff, then until we address those things properly, we'll never be free of it. So then it's always relevant for that reason. And that's kind of what I felt about the rights. Although, like, when you're when you're making films, you're always turning the camera to like the most important or the most heightened version of any story. So a riot is a great example
Yeah.
of that. But you're talking about everyday problems when you're looking at the film as well, because you're talking about people who haven't got jobs, or people who are having to deal with the kind of benefit system, or people who are like feel like they're being harassed by police. And these are everyday problems. They're quite boring, they're mundane in that sense, because they're things that you see all around you all the time, and we don't necessarily think of those things as like as incidents that could lead people towards social unrest, but it's like an accumulation of lots of terrible, like of a situation that you don't like over a long period of time, and that can lead as much to an explosion as like one flashpoint incident. So the
Yeah.
film kind of highlights that, and I think that that's what makes the film relevant today, is that
Yeah.
we're still struggling with this kind of accumulation of different things. And that's what brings as well together people from such a broad range of communities. I mean, in the UK in the 2011 riots, you had people from, it started in London, but then the whole country just exploded, and these people have no reason to be connected to the person, Mark Duggan, whose killing kind of ignited the incident. So that shows that there's something bigger. There's like a shared problem there that people responded to. So I think
Yeah.
that makes it relevant always, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, we're in a world today, with all the, social injustice of people not feeling like they're being heard, and this was a sad, great articulation of what still exists today in many different places. But I think the thing that you just mentioned right now about this, mundane or things that happened, every day, doesn't necessarily mean that it's right, and I think one of the things I love that the way you captured is you took this moment in time and just, again, made us all think as an audience member, like, yes, this happened during this time, but this is still going on all around us, and I think awareness is everything, and you captured that so great. Now listen, I've already mentioned this about 60 times, but I love your style of animation. Like, it was just mesmerizing to sort of watch, and really, really fantastic. So you mentioned that this was going into sort of be a documentary. How did you kind of work through the story, with your skills as an animator? How was that kind of process for you? Did you kind of have a clear vision of how you wanted it to be visually seen before you started, or was something that you kind of worked through as you went along?
Yeah, I mean, it's a new technique. So we combined a few different techniques to make this kind of new approach. But the I had been developing a paint on glass technique that was similar to this from my earlier projects at the film school. And when, as like early in the process of trying to develop the idea, even when it was a documentary, it would have been an animated documentary. So one of the things we were discussing is, because of how important the environment is in the film, it felt like that needed to be a physical, like a physical thing, something like a model set or a really solid 3D model. In the end, because we had such a good model making department at the film school, we went with this handmade model effect. But I felt like the first thing is that needs to be physical, and the second thing is it needs to be deeply rooted in the spaces that we're familiar with in England as being like poor communities. And the estates are one of the best examples of that, not only for the poverty, but also because of the fact that they were kind of initially conceived to be these spaces of the future where everyone would live happily and have enough, kind of have
Yeah.
beautiful living surroundings and stuff. And the irony of those spaces that were designed with this energy and with this love, turning into places that where like communities feel really trapped and really forgotten, is a really, really sad thing. So I always felt that we needed to kind of have that strongly within the film, within the sets. They were always going to play a role. And then the paint just felt like, because of how kind of hard and how like you can visually feel form, and basically when you slap something that's super 2D, super flat, against something that you really feel the form of it. You kill the life of the flat thing, basically. And so we knew that we needed something that lived halfway between the two worlds, that was like a physical thing that you could feel the texture of, but
Yeah.
also had like the approach that we wanted. And the other thing with paint is just that the process can be quite fluid. You can work quite straight ahead, which means you're not having to plan every frame, and that makes you accidents in the middle which make everything feel quite natural. So we just felt that that lent a lot of energy to humans, and especially humans that are kind of resisting their environment. So those
Yeah.
two things quite early were like almost cornerstones of what we were doing with the project.
Oh, I can't wait to see it on the big screen, because it was such a visually wonderful experience to watch. And I love this new technique that you brought in, because it really was, it's so nice when you're seeing something like, wow, I've never seen this before, you know, and especially given the story as well, which was, you know, a very sort of, I mean, young people can watch this, but, you know, had a sort of, definitely a sort of adolescence, adult feel to it as well, you know, although I feel everyone should watch it to sort of understand what went on. Having said all of this, like, I'm so glad, as I told you, about making this film. What did you kind of want your audience to take from this film?
I think like a good outcome from the film is firstly just to, it's important to connect back up the discussions. We're having all of these important discussions as well, like with the fear of like a bit of a recession after the pandemic and stuff. We're having all of these discussions about how society copes with that, where we make cuts and things like this. This is important. It's important to look at what happened when we got that wrong the last time. I mean, the 2011 London riots are off the back of massive cuts and like a change in government. So it's important. I think that sometimes we do ourselves a bit of a disservice, because we have these examples of like what happened when we forgot these groups of people, and because we're trying to convince ourselves that they're not political and they're not connected to like in any important issues, we forget about them when we're making the new decision. But really we need to be thinking about that. So I hope that people will come away and think and kind of see the importance of joining up the dots between some of these types of incidents and some of the decisions we're making now, and they'll make that will make that more kind of pressing for them in terms of their problems.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is all very important things, and I'm so glad that you're, you know, sharing this with us, because, you know, it's definitely wonderful when you watch a film that gives you a lot of thoughts and helps you, you know, articulate that into your life, and the awareness of what is happening in the world as well. What is next for you? What are you working on next?
So I'm actually at the moment working with a director from India who's making a feature. So I'm doing a bit of storyboard work, hopefully, for that, and just like talking about story for that. And the reason why I want to do that is because I'm developing an idea myself to make a feature, and I want to kind of gain a bit of experience of the, you know, the pipeline and how to scale up from doing short film to that. So I think it will be a really good experience. But my hope is obviously to kind of finish off the development of the project that I'm writing, and then try to push that into development as either a feature or a short. It could be a short, but it feels like it has the legs for a feature. So
good, you're making that little step, fingers crossed, right? No,
yeah.
all very, very, very exciting. Well, I love just hearing from you, and I think you've got such a really good, you know, analytical viewpoint as a filmmaker. I'm just curious if there's any kind of advice that you've got out there for any filmmaker who want to follow in your footsteps, or anything you kind of go by, or you've been told, or that's important to you.
Yeah, I mean, the two things that I would say is that the first thing is like, make films about things that you feel strongly about, and that doesn't have to be like any major issue or anything, but something that you really is important to your life and you really feel like you have something to say about. I think that that becomes your anchor when you're in trouble in the production, or when things aren't going as everyone's expecting. As long as you understand what it is you're trying to produce, you can always weather that. So I think that's a good starting point. And the second thing is, just don't be scared to make bad things. It's the hardest thing, but I struggled with this myself. But sometimes you just stop yourself from making anything because you're so scared to get it wrong. But just don't, just make anything, and at the end of it you can say, oh, I hate that, and make something better next time. But just make something, even if you have to do it quickly, just make.
I love it. I love it. Well, listen, thank you for the fire next time. Thank you for bringing this film to us. Please keep making more. I can't wait for the feature, and also your collaboration on the feature as well. It's going to be really very exciting. Wish you all the best of luck, but stay connected. We will never leave you alone, Renaldho. We're always going to be looking for you and waiting for your next film, okay? Thank you. Really appreciate it. But yeah, Renaldho, everyone, and everyone just needs to see the fire next time. It was a real treat. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. See you.
Thank you.